Welcome back into the GSMC Sports Podcast for our final segment of the day, where we are going to just be breaking down some of the bigger storylines and quotes from Celtics Media Day. Of course, the reigning champions did open up on the national stage and have their media day to the public, so they were asked about all types of things. Of course, the Jaylen Brown and Jason Tatum experiences in regards to the Olympics, but also some more important on-the-court issues such as the health of Kristaps Porzingis moving forward and their ownership situation moving forward as well. So I do want to start with the Porzingis piece of this because I think it is, the most important part of the actual on-the-court results for this upcoming season. That it sounds like the timeline for Porzingis for, what we've heard really since the finals was that December is going to be the timeline, roughly speaking. Hard to project out from here. I think that the Celtics are going to try and be as cautious as possible with him. I mean, we saw the level of success that they were able to have in the postseason without him. Really, it's just the first few games of that Heat series. And Porzingis played a massive role in Game 1 of the finals, specifically that electric first half that he did have on both sides of the ball, that it's clear he's important to the team. But the reality is that they don't necessarily need to live and die by him every single game. So they do have the luxury of being able to be a little bit more cautious with him. Al Horford next year, is going to be something like 39, 40 years old, as I'm, double checking here on the fly. But yeah, Horford is going to be, he's actually headed into his 38th season. So honestly, a little bit younger than I even thought than he was. That being said, still not somebody that you are hoping is going to play, 30 plus minutes per game for you like he was 2 seasons ago, pre-Porzingis, but still is going to, be a prominent factor there. They have some of the other centers on board where they just signed Luke Cornett to a new extension, and really breaking down specifically the situation with Porzingis and how is it that the Celtics were able to survive in the postseason? Is it because everybody else was terrible? They definitely benefited from some injuries, but it was because of the development of Jason Tatum on the defensive side of the ball, in my opinion, because he was legitimately guarding fives on opposing teams. Specifically, you look at the second round series against the Cleveland Cavaliers, where he was matched up against Evan Mobley for a lot of that series. And then the fact that Tatum was able to play against Lively, and specifically Mobley and Lively, I would say 2 young, fun, exciting players, but not ones that you necessarily feel like are massive threats for posting you up and taking advantage of you there. Now, I don't think that Tatum would be able to guard a Jokic in the post, but, these shorter centers that, again, don't necessarily have the entire, offensive bag and specifically the post moves into their game already, that you can get away with Tatum being your center because he's also their leading rebounder as well. Now, he benefits from the ability of being able to crash in when you have the likes of a Porzingis in, but either way, it's not like Porzingis is necessarily an elite rebounder in his own right. He's no slouch, but he is still, Tatum is the team's best rebounder, just flat out. And I think that you're probably going to see some lineups of Tatum continuing to play the 5. We also saw very early in the year last year, Drew Holiday, where he was matching up against some of the top bigs in the NBA. Early on, I remember games, it was him matched up against Julius Randle, Karl Anthony Towns, even Joel Embiid at one point. And that's something that I think the Celtics are going to be able to still lean on, at least to some degree. Now, obviously, they would prefer to have Porzingis back and have him be an actual big man for them, but I still think that they're going to be able to get by for a while. Now, sort of circling that back to what we heard from Celtics Media Day is the fact that Porzingis seems to feel pretty good. That the timeline is still December. We'll see whether or not they push that to January. But Porzingis himself said, quote, "Obviously, the energy I'm feeling from the doctor, the surgeon, the medical staff is to not rush anything. For myself, if you ask me, and I had to do my own protocol, I would probably go quicker, but that's a good sign. I'm feeling really good." So I don't think that it should be a serious concern with Porzingis moving forward, that he should be ready to go probably in that second half of the season. The question, I suppose, is, well, will the Celtics be able to sort of stay alive in an Eastern Conference that should be at least a little bit more competitive at the top? Last year, you look at the Knicks getting the second seed with 50 wins. That would have been outside of the top four in the Western Conference, but the Knicks now adding Mikal Bridges, year 2 of Doc with the Bucks, and year 2 of the Lillard-Giannis experiment is probably what I should have had as the headliner for the Bucks there. But I think it is a pretty good Eastern Conference. And we'll add as well, I suppose, the new revamped Big Three with Philadelphia and Maxey, Paul George, and Embiid. Hopefully we get a full Embiid season. That I think the Celtics are going to be able to tread water pretty well, but we will have to see. But it's going to take the Celtics also having that want, and that was kind of my biggest takeaway. And obviously we're talking about quotes here from a media day. You're not going to get a team saying, "Oh yeah, we're thrilled that we got this championship and that's it." That's just never going to happen in professional sports. But I do feel like the way that this whole offseason sort of unraveled for them, that the first question Jaylen Brown is getting asked at media day is about not being selected to Team USA. And he was a little bit caught off guard. But then when he starts answering the questions, he is getting into that there is a situation that, he feels like he has to go out and prove himself. And I don't think that that's a bad thing whatsoever, where he feels like, he called it, quote, "for obvious reasons," he needs to go out there and assert himself, which I do still feel like is a good thing. And then you add on top of that as well the fact that Jason Tatum was getting inconsistent playing time in the Olympics. And there is this conversation about the fact that he ended up not winning Finals MVP. And to that, Tatum said, quote, "Joe," as in Coach Joe Mazzulla, "was probably the happiest person in the world that I didn't win Finals MVP and I didn't play in 2 of the games in the Olympics." So that was odd, but if you know Joe, it makes sense. And this is the same Joe Mazzulla who, this was a couple weeks ago, he was talking to reporters and he had given the quote about the phrase defending a title as a very passive-aggressive term. He said, quote, "If you look at the animal kingdom, some of the strongest animals don't defend. They're the most aggressive and they attack the most." Like, that is such a Joe Mazzulla quote. Is he a little bit of a psycho? Sure, but I think in the best way possible. That I think that his energy is sort of infectious to the team. And it feels like what I got from that Tatum quote as well is that Joe is going to be sort of tugging at the strings throughout the season to sort of remind this team, or at least try and manipulate almost this Celtics team into having their chip on their shoulder. Because this is, whether you like them or not, I think it is entirely disingenuous to completely disregard last year's Celtics team as one of the most talented in NBA history. You want to argue that they benefited from injuries in the playoffs and stuff like that. I hear you, and also benefited from not having to go up against the likes of Nikola Jokic and the Nuggets, which I do think would have been, realistically the only team that would have stood a real threat to the Celtics, in my opinion. Injuries aside as well, I would take, the Celtics over the Knicks or the Heat, even with the injuries there. I don't know how the Celtics necessarily would have been able to stop Jokic. So that's a whole different conversation. If you want to say they lucked out with their path to the playoffs, I mean, I'm not going to fight you on it. I'm not going to entirely agree, because I think that the Eastern Conference was always there. As we just mentioned, the second seed in the East won just 50 games. They won the East by 14 games, and that was with almost hardly trying in the final month of the season. So I think that this is a Celtics team that is historically great. You take your pick on where you want to put them in. I feel like you have to put them somewhere in that top 10, probably, a little bit closer to 5-ish, but they also get to at least somewhat play the no one believes in us card, which is a little bit ridiculous, but I'm sure there are also those of you out there who don't believe in the Celtics as well. So it is just sort of an opportunity to kind of, looking across town, the Bill Belichick and Tom Brady bulletin board material and the Michael Jordan bulletin board material, all of those types of things that shape the greats. I think the Celtics are going to be able to play those cards a little bit this upcoming season, and I'm expecting them to be able to. I mean, the reality is I thought the Nuggets were easily going to be able, I wouldn't say easily, but I thought they were comfortably, I should say, be able to come out of the Western Conference once again and make another run for a title defense. So I feel like that with the Celtics again. I think that they have the talent for it, but when you talk about the fatigue of it is very difficult to play all the way into late June. Add on top of that the fact that the Olympics, the Celtics had 3 of their guys out there. They have their share of challenges, but I do feel like those challenges are sort of more internal than across the Eastern Conference. And I say that also acknowledging that the East should not be quite as easy of a cakewalk as it was last year. And even if the Celtics were to be able to, pull off another championship run, I have a hard time imagining they lose just 3 games in that run, that there are going to be more difficult teams in their path. But let me know what your thoughts are in the comments section. That is all the time we have for today. Thank you very much for tuning into the GSMC Sports Podcast. Thank you to the GSMC Sports Network for allowing us to host this show. Remember to like, follow, subscribe wherever you may be keeping up with us. Be sure to check us out on social media as well for more exclusive short content. And we will be back tomorrow afternoon, same time as always at 2 o'clock p.m. Eastern. We will see you then. Take care.
Let's go. I wake up to a little bit of drool on my pillow, feel like it's gonna be a bad day. Yeah, I'm tired of shit, and the coffee ain't hit yet, damn, ain't that great.